I would like you to welcome Darcy Burner, who is running in Washington's 1st District for Congress.
So, I'm Darcy Burner. You all may remember me as the geekiest candidate ever to run for Congress. This was one of the less helpful days in the last campaign I ran for the U.S. House of Representatives, but you will note the pajamas. The fact that I am a geek is relevant to the discussion at hand today, which is how we go on offense on the war on women. I actually started out my career as a software developer, and my early software development experience was at Lotus Development Corporation, where I worked on Smart Suite and Note Suite. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to have ever used a Lotus product, but Lotus's products were better than Microsoft Office. They had a better feature set, they were more stable, they were more usable, and they only cost $99 in an era in which Microsoft Office cost $395. And I was incredibly frustrated because we were losing anyway. And I wanted to understand why Lotus was losing. I eventually made my way to Microsoft, where I learned something very important, which is that Microsoft was playing a completely different game than Lotus had been playing. At Lotus, we thought if we built better software, we would win. At Microsoft, what they understood was that it was incredibly important to think about how the 1,000th copy you sold was going to be easier to sell than the first copy, how the 100,000th would be easier to sell than the 1,000th. And they had realized that with Office products, the single most important factor was who you had to exchange documents with. So if you had to exchange documents with somebody who had Microsoft Office, then you would use Microsoft Office. They therefore bootstrapped Office into a whole bunch of large corporations. Then everybody who had to exchange documents with those people needed Microsoft Office, and everybody who had to exchange documents with those people needed Microsoft Office. Microsoft won because they understood what the game really was. And I feel a lot of the time as Democrats like we're the Lotus of politics. We think that it's all about policy. It's all about feature set, and if we have the better policies, we will win. I am sorry to be the one to break this to all of you, but that's not true. At the end of the day, this is a game that is about power. And the right wing understands that. And if we want to win, we need to play the game that is really being played. So, the tool that we use to change behavior in other people is power, which comes in two flavors: force or consent. Now, anybody who has ever had a small child, and I have a now 9-year-old, can tell you force doesn't scale very far. And consent is where the real power is. That's an important thing to keep in mind because the right spends most of their energy on force and very little of it on consent. This is a game we can win if we play it correctly. There are 6 basic types of power. Economic power, who owns what? Political power, who gets to make the rules? Military, police, or court power, over whom can we extend our rules? Those are all force-based types of power. Cultural power, what stories do we tell ourselves about who we are? Moral power, what stories do we tell ourselves about who we're supposed to be? And network power, who can we connect with? How broad is our reach? Who will listen to us? It's important to understand that all 6 types of power are fungible. If you have enough of one, you can trade it for any one of the others. And that is true for us, and it is true for the other side as well. So on economic power, it can be either things that you buy to change the way the world is, or things that you choose not to spend money on to change the way the world is. In the war on women, there is an obvious application of economic power we should have. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, you didn't like the Koch brothers. hypothetically. And you thought that their investments in right-wing infrastructure were problematic for the future of our country. Well, it happens that the Koch brothers own a company called Georgia Pacific, and Georgia Pacific makes a whole bunch of consumer products, including, among other things, Dixie cups and brawny paper towels. So we should say, all right, we don't want women, who, by the way, do more than 80% of all of the consumer shopping in this country, to buy brawny paper towels anymore. But it's a very difficult thing for people to remember all of the products they're not supposed to buy. So let's make it easy on them. And have you ever seen one of these devices and carried it in a grocery store? What if we had an application that you could use to scan a barcode on any product that would tell you how good it was on issues we care about? Let's make it easy for people to exercise their economic power for change. Political power is all about votes. Now, there are 3 women who are going to talk to you today who would like you to exercise some political power to help us. But I want to point out to all of you that turnout this year is a real issue. We spend virtually all of our time talking about that teeny little dark purple slice of swing voters. These are the numbers in my district. These are the real numbers, right? We've got 514,319 people who are eligible to vote. Only 381,000 of them are registered. There are only 58,000 who vote in every election, right? 1% of the people in the district are those swing voters who vote in every election. The real interesting piece here is the light blue slice, the Democrats who don't always vote, and the people who don't vote, they're registered but they don't vote, and the people who are not registered. Now, this is a pie graph for a district in one of the highest turnout states in the country. If you were to look at a comparable pie graph for a state like Texas, the actually vote slices would be half the size they are in this diagram. So I have exactly one ask for you between now and November, and that is get women to vote. Military, police, or court power can absolutely be used in our favor, as it has been to combat domestic violence, as it was when we decided to desegregate the schools and U.S. Marshals escorted people in. So here's my proposal for what women should do. It turns out that virtually every Fortune 500 company is doing wage discrimination against women. We know that statistically. There ought to be some organization, hypothetically speaking, maybe the National Women's Law Center or someplace like that, that proactively goes into, say, the Fortune 50, finds plaintiffs, sues the bejesus out of them for violating equal pay laws. And then you do shareholder lawsuits for the rest of the companies for failing to disclose their risk because they've been discriminating against women, and that presents a legal liability. We have power. It is high time we used it. Cultural power, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are incredibly important. In the civil rights movement, To Kill a Mockingbird, as a book and a movie, changed an enormous number of minds about how fair our system was in just 3 years. Recently, we have seen something very comparable on television. My dad, when I was running in 2006, was quite shocked that I supported gay marriage and thought when 2 consenting adults wanted to get married, we should wish them the best of luck. He thought, he's a registered Republican, he's in Nebraska, he thought that was a really terrible thing. And I was talking to him the other day, just before Christmas, and he was like, yeah, you know, your Uncle Charlie probably is gay, and I was like, that is cultural change. Because television has given us, now everyone has a gay best friend, whether they actually do or not. We've changed the stories in people's heads, and that has changed what has become possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can change the stories in people's heads about a particular issue for women, but I would ask if you would that you give me 30 seconds in which you don't applaud or say anything. So if you are a woman in this room, and statistically what I'm about to say is true of about a third of the women in this room, if you are a woman in this room who has had an abortion and is willing to come out about it, please stand up. Don't, wait, please, wait. Now, if you are willing to stand with every woman who is willing to come out about having had an abortion, please join them and stand up. This is how we change the stories in people's heads. Now you may applaud. We need to make it okay for women to come out about the choices that we've made. Moral power. We on the left tend to think of moral power as being all about religion, and I want to be clear that religion does have an important role in building consent, sometimes in very good ways. I happen to think the idea that we should do unto others as we would have them do unto us is a very good, very progressive idea. But it is not the only form of moral power. There is a form of moral power that we use on the left that is more powerful even than religion, which is the use of protest to undermine consent in an unjust system. Oop, I apparently pressed the button too quickly. Let me give you some examples of that. The use of protest to undermine consent in an unjust system. Now, I've had approximately 1 million baby boomers say to me over the years, we just need a march on Washington. And I would like to say that's not what I'm talking about. There is, in fact, a recipe for how you make protest work correctly. 5 elements. The recipe is you have to have people who are protesting that your audience considers to be innocent of any wrongdoing. This is why nonviolence is so incredibly important. If they pick up a rock, if they're carrying a gun, if they make a threat, they no longer count as innocent. They need to voluntarily put themselves in harm's way. The use of official force has to come down on them in a way that is widely communicated and shocks the conscience. So let me give you some examples of some such moments so that you can consider whether you think I am an engineer, I did reverse engineer this. Whether you think my reverse engineering is accurate. So, children being attacked by fire hoses and dogs during the civil rights movement. Kent State. Tiananmen Square. The Arab Spring protests. Occupy UC Davis. Occupy Seattle on my home turf. In every case, innocent people were willing to voluntarily put themselves in harm's way and subject themselves to the use of official force in a way that was widely communicated, shocked the conscience, and changed the world. So, for the women's movement, it is high time we followed our great-grandmother's leads and passed the Equal Rights Amendment. This is a perfect opportunity for the use of moral power because the American public considers particularly older women as innocent as it gets, whether we are or not, which is great. And finally, we can't change consent if people can't hear us, if people don't know what it is we're doing. So we have to build networks so that we can communicate with people. Those networks can be any sort of communications mechanism you would like. They can be email, they can be telephones, they can be door-to-door, they can be face-to-face meetings, they can be the sides of coffee cups. Thank you, Starbucks. But we have to build the communications network so that we can communicate with the rest of the world. So what can we do in the next year? I wanted to give you a set of things that it would be possible to do in the next year to go on offense in the war against women. It is long past time we stop playing defense. We can exercise economic power and start boycotting everything that feeds the Koch brothers machine. We can exercise political power, and if the only thing we do is get women to vote, we win. We can exercise the court and police power and enforce the laws that we have fought for and won already to force the largest corporations in the world to do the right thing with respect to women. We can exercise cultural power and have women come out of the closet, cast off the shame and the embarrassment that the right would like to put upon us, and stand up tall for the choices that we make. We can exercise moral power and fight for something big. Did you know that more than 80% of Americans think the Constitution already provides equal rights for women? This isn't actually a particularly controversial idea, but it matters. And finally, we have to build networks. This is one of the biggest holes in the women's movement, that we don't have an effective network of networks. It doesn't have to be just one, but everyone in this room should be participating in some network or organization that communicates about issues that are important to women. This is how we go on offense and win. With that, I want to thank you all so much for your attention.